people say construction doesn't use tech, but the truth is there's actually almost too much tech that's not integrated. And so telling that, I think, I've heard stories of people having to, upload, permits into like 3 different pieces of software for like the subcontractor, principal contractor, developer, and just insane things like that. So, in trying to introduce a 30th platform is just never going to work. So as you say, I think being able to integrate and be kind of agile and fit into what they're already using is, I think, another great advantage of us being a very young, agile tech company can hopefully bring us.
Hello everybody, Gavin Coyle here, back with another great guest. It's Lucy Clarke, and Lucy is the co-founder of Fixed Construction, and they're based in the UK, and it's a fascinating story of how venture capitalist money or investors are willing to invest in new construction companies or new companies in the construction sector. And this lady and her co-founder raise capital at a level that's a very high level in terms of a new entry into an already fairly mature and saturated market, but obviously has a point of difference. And I'm really interested to get to that point of interest with regards to Lucy today. So Lucy, thanks very much for joining I'm the Gaffer podcast. We're delighted to have you here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this one because your background is very interesting in terms of the Goldman Sachs professional move, and that was 2015 to 2019.
Yeah, feels like a long time ago.
You were raising capital for other people, or you were investing in other companies, or you were researching markets, or what was your role in there at that time?
Yeah, so as you said, background is probably is not construction. So first job was Goldman Sachs investment banking. So spent the first 4 years of my career essentially advising large FTSE 100 businesses. It did include some construction companies, which I always found fascinating, but I was quite sort of broad, sector agnostic, and managed to work with a lot of the biggest companies in the UK, which was really exciting. I, however, realized I wanted to one day start my own business. And so working with very, very large companies wasn't really getting me closer to the idea of founding a business and that really early stage of kind of 0 to 1. So I decided to move into venture capital myself. So went into a job at Octopus Ventures, which is a multi-billion fund in London investing across sectors. So I joined the fund to help build out their B2B software and marketplace team. So that's business to business, where, again, I focus quite heavily on construction tech for reasons which I'm sure will become obvious later in the conversation. But yeah. I was really, really excited by investing in these really early stage companies, looking at kind of macro trends that other investors are excited about, and deciding where to allocate capital. But during that time, I realized, actually, I want to be building something. There's only so much you can do as an investor to have real impact and value and actually build something. So I left back in January 2023 to start Fixed.
And what really interests me there is you're listening to the energy and the passion from the founders of these different companies, and I'm sure that they must be very infectious. You must come away from some of those meetings going, God, I wish I had that energy, or wish I had that enthusiasm in terms of something for yourself. Was that maybe a part of it?
Absolutely. It was so energizing to be around people who were so passionate about what they were building, real kind of industry experts in their field, and the people who are actually building the companies of tomorrow. And as a VC investor, you're basically trying to find the next unicorn. So that would be a company that's valued at over £1 billion by the private markets.
Yeah.
And so when you're looking at really early stage businesses, it's kind of crazy. You're looking at literally like 1 to 2 person businesses. Yeah. Sometimes at the stage of like a pitch deck, as we were at Fixed when we raised. And trying to decide, are these founders the ones that will be the next Uber or, one of these amazing businesses? So it's, and the founders who we up against in that field were all that enthusiastic, that ambitious, and like really just focused on their end goal of building a really huge, impactful businesses.
And so is there sort of common traits that you would look for, say, for example, Gavin Coyle Enterprises decided he was going to set up some sort of a tech construction company, and I have a co-founder maybe I bring on a chief operating officer or maybe some CTO type of a person as well, because obviously it's tech. Like, is there some red flags that you go straight away, put that aside because, that's not going to happen? Or is there a gut instinct part of it?
Definitely, gut instinct is a huge part of it. I think so. I would say that when investors talk to companies at that really early stage, they're looking for two main signals that basically indicate the potential for this company to return their fund to become £1 billion business. The first is, do the founder or founders, have the background or experience to build this particular business? Not just any business, because you might have a great CEO, but not a great business person in construction, for example.
Yeah.
And feel free to push me on that, given my background's not in construction. So we call that in VC founder market fit. And then the second piece is, do we believe the market is big enough and the problem is big enough to support either one or multiple multi-billion pound businesses? In our case, there was, the backgrounds of our three co-founders. So it's me, my husband, Henrik, whose background is construction and has been in the construction industry his entire career. And then our third co-founder, Des, who's an ex-software developer at IBM and Google, total superstar, who's actually built tech products. And so the three of us were, and my experience in finance and building marketplaces and what goes wrong in early stage technology and how to build the supply and demand dynamics, things like that in a marketplace. So we as a team were very uniquely positioned to solve this particular problem that we're going after.
I think that resonates with me big time, because I set up a software business a couple of years back, and it cost me a lot of money. And what I done was I actually went around a couple of the investment houses just to get sort of sound bites from them of what value looks like for them on the table. And it's exactly how you couldn't have put it any better. That's exactly how they looked at it as well. And it did give me a bit of a scare, in the sense that the problem probably wasn't as big as I thought it was. And I think this, I did convince myself that the problem was big, but the market definitely kicked back and said, no, it's not as big as you think it is. But I suppose the beauty about that particular business was I was able to pivot and then put it into another direction, where the bigger scale was. But I didn't realize that until the market started coming back to me and going, no, I don't like it. But actually, here's where the problem is. So, do you have a lot of those conversations where you say, look, we don't think you're fully ready with the market, but come back to us in 6 months' time once you've got a bit of beta testing or whatever it is?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. And I think when you think about the construction market, anyone who's planning to build a construction tech startup or any construction business, I think thinking about what your end market looks like is the first question. If you're asking whether VC funding is the right type of funding you're going after. So if you're like us, we are a recruitment agency using technology to streamline processes, essentially make it better for companies and workers, and just basically bring it into the 21st century. Our end market is every single construction company that currently uses a recruitment agency, which is 75% of the 100,000 companies in the UK. Like, absolutely insane numbers. But there are a lot of companies, tech companies, whose end market is principal contractors. How many of them are there that are big enough to spend hundreds of thousands of pounds a month on a software product? The market is actually considerably smaller. And so, when you think about whether or not you want to build a business in construction, it's, which part of the market is your end market? Are you going after the long tail? Are you going after the big companies? How big could each individual contract be? And that's, for me as an investor, that's why I got so excited about where we are in the market, because I was thinking, this is absolutely massive.
Yeah. Like I look, there'll always be a people issue. I think that's probably the first part of the probably pitch deck that you produced. And I was blown away by the fact that you actually, hadn't really fully scaled up by the time, you went into that meeting. And it just goes to show you how well prepared you were, that you had all those touch points clarified. Was there a point in time in the meeting that you said to yourself, this is not going to go too well? Or, I don't know if I'm getting everybody to the table with the vision?
Yeah, I mean it was such an interesting piece because as a team we knew how deeply this affects the industry, inside and out, workers, companies, and so we kind of set out going to investors and said, we just walked into the room with them and said, look at this huge problem, look how much companies are spending. This is our solution. Hand over the money now. Surely there's no questions. Like, right, surely. And then obviously the first sort of 50 conversations were like, I don't really know the construction industry. Tell me, how does that actually work? Like, why are they using recruitment agencies? I don't understand. What is the model? What's the margins? And so suddenly I realize I'm talking to people who are generalists. 95% of VCs are generalists. They invest in crypto, fintech, prop tech, travel tech. And so you can't be an expert in every part of what you're investing in. And I definitely wasn't, by the way, when I was an investor. So actually, I was probably a bit naive when we went into the raise originally, and realized, we need to show these very data-driven and actually, funnily enough, quite risk-averse people how we are kind of going to be spending their money in the right way, and how kind of unrisky, I guess, this prospect is. And so what we did to counter those initial pushbacks was we basically produced a survey, which is very simple, to support the data that we knew was true already in the industry. How many companies are using recruitment agencies? How are workers finding work today? Just so that the investors who didn't know anything about the industry could then, look at some data and actually see that our thesis was supported by real data that they could actually show to their investment committee. Like, actually, these guys already have a huge market in front of them. They're just putting a bit of cool tech into it to make it a much better process.
Yeah, no, that's very powerful. That information alone is very powerful. So, like, you don't need this long presentation, or to bore the hell off these people for an hour. It's kind of like big problem, solution, and here's the data that supports all of that. And you could do that in probably 2 or 3 slides in a deck. I take it.
And I think we could have done it better. And we'll be fundraising again soon. Spoiler alert. And we, I think, there's so much more data now that we have, obviously having been in this for a year. I know that some construction companies are spending upwards of hundreds of millions of pounds every year on this problem. I looked at our top 10 competitors of traditional recruitment agencies doing temporary labour sourcing, and they, between 10 companies, have $1 billion in turnover every year. And that's just 10, and there's thousands. So, it's such exciting numbers for someone who wants to build a really impactful, big business. But now I can go to these investor conversations and be like, check out these annual reports, which are public on Companies House, of all of our competitors. Here's how we're going to, here's how we can operationally improve their business, give better prices to our customers, and basically eat up the market share in the next 10 years and become the next kind of Uber for construction hiring.
Brilliant. I love it. The one consideration that I have learned in the process, and I've watched other people that were bringing new tech companies into construction, was the breaking down the all conservative view, or the sort of culture of, it is the way it is, bricks and mortar, and, this is the way we've always done it. And, they're very slow to change, I found, in the construction industry, as opposed to maybe some other industries. Have you found that barrier?
So yes, 100%. I think this was one of our question marks going into this was, this resistance to change that people always talk about with construction. I think, the way that we get around that is that we actually, on the company side, don't require any change in behavior from our customers. So we are basically building processes to actually meet them where they are. We're not asking them to use any kind of fancy new tech or use our platform that's separate to their other 50 platforms that they have to use. They can keep their process exactly the same. And all of our tech actually kicks in after the moment that they put their order in. So that's where we use all of our tech and AI to source the actual workforce, to vet the workforce, to check their CSCS cards, to check their right to work, and check their references, all of those things that take people long time in a kind of traditional agency. We're able to basically put a quarter of the number of people to the same tasks, and therefore give better prices to our customers.
I think you've absolutely nailed that, because as you were talking there, every person that I knew that got burnt in this space, that's exactly the problem that they had, was that they had to educate the current workforce on how to use the software. And now you're asking the people that are buying the software or the tech to be your sort of salespeople, if you like, in their own business, so that they then sell it on to their own employees. And that's not what their role is. And this is where next thing all of a sudden you start hearing stories about, oh, there's a gatekeeper in there and I can't get past the gatekeeper. It's not that they're a gatekeeper. They're not there to sell your product. You know what I mean? There should be no friction about it all. It's exactly what you just said there. It's like for me, it's a big moment in terms of listening to all the horror stories that you've just nailed that. You said, no, it's a plug and play. It's exactly, doesn't disrupt the business flow keeps moving, and nobody has to stop work and turn their head around and go, oh, what's this new machine over here?
Exactly. I think that's the thing is, when we start saying we're going to use clever tech to revolutionize and disrupt and change, I think people are like, firstly, who are you? You're not from construction. You don't know how things work, which is always a fair challenge. I think, you need to really understand how the industry works to build things, products that really work for the industry. And that's why Henrik, our co-founder, is so essential to our team, and why we've built, for example, the worker side of our product is built all in WhatsApp. So again, workers don't have to download a special app, which they're never going to open, is never going to give them a good experience. They just get a WhatsApp chat from Fixed Construction Jobs that gives them their latest job alert. And so, those kind of product features seem really simple, but we've sat with people from the industry for hours on end, talking to them about why they wouldn't use a competitor of ours or a previous app that hasn't worked out. And it's generally, it's these small kind of behavioral things that are specific to an industry.
Oh, it's brilliant.
And language barriers, for example, is another big one. Where people don't use Indeed because they don't want to create a CV. They don't speak, they don't write English very well. Fair enough, not your first language. I don't write, Polish very well. And so I think, that those kind of small features actually, when you kind of put them all together, make a very different product experience, but also are kind of aligned to how people are behaving already.
Yeah. And I think, nobody wants to be the person that pressed the button on something that could cost millions. And now you've got a demotivated workforce who are forced into using a particular piece of tech that was sold to them as, the revolution of construction. And, I think, with all due respect to everyone, there's only so far you can go with the tech in order to make it efficient. There's always going to be a human element to everything. And I think you've nailed that as well in terms of, the human, let's see how we can make it frictionless for the human being so that they can skip that part and skip that part and skip that part, and we'll take care of all that in between pieces. Would that be fair to say? Is that the sort of...
Absolutely. For us, it's all about creating what we call operational leverage in a business that can be so much more efficient. So, in the small things, people often don't even realize how complex the process of placing, temporary workers on site is. It's, all of the process of checking right to work, identity, placing them, paying them, CIS checks, vetting them, exactly, references, all of those things, take a lot of time. And that time costs money to traditional recruitment agencies. And so where a traditional agency can manage, 50 people at best, if they're really efficient with people, we can manage 150 and maybe 200 per, internal, operational employee. And so that means we can just reduce our costs to the end customer and ultimately give them a fairer price and a better experience than what they're getting from kind of, the previous world of agencies. I think the opportunities that AI has to continue to improve all of that as well are kind of terrifying, but also amazing.
Yeah, but you're swimming with sharks 100%. Like,
yes.
Yeah. Total Jobs, I don't know, Indeed, LinkedIn, and then you go to the bricks and mortar of Hayes Recruitment and all of these companies that are you're messing with their territory, and there's a lot of currency that these guys and companies have under the table. So, how do you see yourself in the future, swimming with the sharks and coming out, well above where you need to be in terms of to get yourself a bit of breathing space past these people, so that you're you're in the green zone. I'd imagine there's a red, orange, green indicator in your metrics walls in the office and stuff like that, where, you have risk in the business to a point. So, where do you see the leveling off where you don't have as much risk on the table in terms of your business model?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is an inherently risky business model, and people really underestimate that when they, I've heard of like other businesses in the sort of adjacent spaces being like, oh yeah, one day we're going to tack on a recruitment agency to our business, and I'm like, oh yeah, sure, go ahead. I mean, it's really not as straightforward as people think. The working capital you have to put behind the business, and which is why we raised funding last year rather than trying to bootstrap our first kind of initial product. I think, if you think about where the working capital in a construction project flows, we are the last layer, even below the workforce. So, when something goes bad, or people are late paying, we are literally the bottom of the food chain because we pay our workers before we even get paid. So,
okay, so you're the paymaster, are you?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so that creates a huge amount of risk. And
Lucy.
Terrifying, right?
I was concentrating on the tech, and I wasn't connecting the payroll and your bank account with the worker.
Yeah, it's so
wow.
that piece is. There's also massive opportunity there, by the way, in terms of, and I'm sure you will have seen it as well. In terms of payroll, all of these payroll companies that are fantastic, by the way, and have very smart business models in terms of charging companies, 50 quid a week per worker to just manage their CIS risk, essentially. There's also a huge opportunity for us there. And that's how we think about the future is right now we work with partners. In future, we can kind of continue to eat up more and more of the pie, make it more and more affordable for companies, and kind of manage that full stack from source all the way through to hire, manage and pay.
Wow.
And that opportunity is huge.
Okay, so let's get into that a little bit.
The payroll rabbit hole.
Well, you mentioned Uber earlier on. So Uber's obviously somewhere in your mindset, and so the logic is they don't own any taxis, yet they own the market. So where do you see a comparative in that regard, or maybe am I missing that? Because it seems very much like you have Uber, but you also have you own the taxi and you own the driver in the car. Not that you own, but you have that responsibility.
Yeah. I think that is where we see the vision of this is actually being kind of one step removed and removing the need for the middleman altogether. And this is where our kind of vision for the business, it becomes a little bit more kind of out there, I think. But, we recognize that creating a marketplace like Uber overnight for construction hiring is just not possible because of the nature of how skilled construction roles are. And anyone who thinks, that just checking someone's got a CSCS card is like the end of the story just has clearly never worked in construction, right? So, the reason that no one is doing this at scale for construction is because of how complex it is to check and vet someone's skills, someone's references. And so that, building those digital profiles and records of people's work and achievements in construction is a big part of our strategy. And obviously having that database of this is a verified person who is definitely a shuttering carpenter, who has definitely built lift shafts on their previous project. And we've had that signed off by the project manager at X company.
Brilliant.
These kind of signals we can add mean that one day, and this is really exciting for us, we can actually step away from the transaction altogether, and it can just be company to worker without the need for the sort of middleman interference and cost. And that's when it becomes a real kind of Uber-like transaction where it's like company comes onto the product or phones up an AI agent or something, says, I need 2 shuttering carpenters tomorrow in this location. They need to have this experience and this card. And then the system would just recommend these 2 workers who also have, signaled that they're not in work at the moment and that they live locally and can fulfill your Section 106 obligation at the same time. And, that would just do the match. And obviously, I think I'm not naive enough to think that that's like next year or the year after. It's probably 10 years away because of how complex the challenge is. But I think that's where this becomes truly disruptive to the traditional agency model. We get rid of agency fees and the working capital requirement from us. And it just becomes a pure play marketplace that companies just pay to access.
So the obvious question that's probably born on everybody, if I don't ask this question, I'll probably get um, pulled up on it anyway, at the least. Who's the employer
As in, it's in that
in that
scenario.
model, in that scenario? Yeah.
So in that scenario, the company or their payroll company would be the employer. So hopefully by then companies will be able to then employ people directly, even if they're temporary, like they do today, through CIS, or their payroll company. So a lot of companies use payroll to help them with their CIS obligations and just to kind of, I guess, defer their working capital.
But in terms of the employment rights to that individual, is that the company that owns that right in terms of the obligation and the legal requirement?
Yeah, so I mean, if they're a self-employed subcontractor through CIS, that person's self-employed. The person, they'll have a contract with either the company or the payroll company. If they're PAYE employee, which hopefully more people will be, although the numbers at the moment are definitely going in the opposite direction, unfortunately. Increasing number of CIS workers in the last year, which is interesting.
Even with IR35?
Even with IR35 and increasing scrutiny from HMRC, the numbers
Wow.
are going the opposite direction. And that's a cost issue, right? It costs companies less to hire people through CIS. And so it makes more sense to have, when they're being squeezed in other areas, to hire more people through CIS than direct.
So you're not going to take that obligation?
Well, we can. I think we can, and obviously we can make more money doing that. But if we could get away from it in cases where companies also don't want to pay the ongoing agency fees, then that it feels like a no-brainer as well. When we offer companies the choice, would you like to hire someone through agency for 8 months, or would you like to hire them direct? 10 times out of 10 they'll say, I want to take them direct. How can you make that happen?
Yeah. Well, depending on the seniority, I would imagine, in terms of, that's interesting, especially in a talent pool that's in short of supply. I'm just thinking, like, it's a grand vision, and it's very brave for you to try and tackle it, and to kudos to every one of you in that regard. So, what has been the sort of kickbacks to this point? What has been the ones that have said, you know what, we better go back and relook the model because we probably didn't anticipate that particular part of the overall? And it could be a tech issue. It doesn't have to be a sort of the person issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think so at one point we've explored like the idea of just doing direct hires for like a fixed fee. And I think, there is something in that, I think, in construction, which is different from other sectors. But, for us, if someone asks us for a labourer for one day, it's not like they're not going to want to pay £250 placement fee for that.
Yeah.
And so often the needs are so temporary or short term, of like particularly smaller customers in the space. For like big RC frame subcontractors, that's rarely the case that they want someone for a day. It's like they need help kind of onboarding people for a few weeks or months or even longer. So it kind of depends on which customers we're going after. But yeah, in those short-term scenarios, the kind of direct fee doesn't make sense. So I think, I wouldn't say we've solved everything in terms of business model. And that vision I described before is, it's a vision. It's not. I don't think there's nothing wrong with us staying as an agency. I've mentioned before how huge the agencies are that exist today. And if we're just a really, really good tech-enabled agency that's got 100 times more efficient than your next best one, then that's a really great business. But I think, I think because of the nature of our team's backgrounds in kind of tech and, entrepreneurship, we're always thinking about how we could be doing things differently, what we could be doing better, and, really trying to challenge the norms.
Okay, so what if I said to you that I have hypothetical curveball question coming at you, by the way. Gavin Coyle Recruitment, and actually I really like what you're doing. Would you license that software to me? And I have the pool of construction companies that you really are your target customers. So I think I can convince you that you can give me that software and that model. Is that another revenue stream that you've looked at, or is it a completely closed shop?
So it's an interesting one. It's always on my mind that's an option. And we actually do have recruitment agencies who use our platform for free to post their jobs and to get people. And at the moment, that's fine for us. We are in the business of trying to help people find work, and, we want to have a positive impact on people. So, and we already take agency jobs from all the different kind of online platforms like CV Library, Indeed, Facebook groups, etc. So, it's only adding value to our platform for people to post there, because we just get better jobs, better quality jobs, verified jobs from people we know are real recruitment agents rather than scammers, etc. But I think, and that also shows, if every time they've posted a job, they found someone, we have real value, and we could start charging or licensing what we do to them at some point. I think, to me, if we do that, as I'm sure you're thinking right now, is like, where's our competitive edge then if we're licensing out our tech to everyone else?
No, I'm thinking if I put $500,000 into your fund or into your company, I'm saying, how am I going to get my money out quick? And if Mr. I don't know, top 3 recruitment companies in the world comes to me and says, love that, I'll license that off you. There's also an argument that they might license it off you as an exclusivity and then put it in the shelf so you don't actually become upstream and start eating their lunch.
Yeah.
But and I suppose you don't want that to happen either. But
we wouldn't take that.
Pardon?
We wouldn't take that offer.
No, you wouldn't. Like I remember from our original discussion when we met. It's the grand vision would be that you own all the employees, and that the agency model becomes something that you look back at nearly like the Industrial Revolution that it was back in those days. And it's like there's still the master and the servant sort of scenario even in the modern day age. And I know that language is not appropriate, but there's still that sort of paymaster and the person doing the work sort of model. That's not going to change. It's how that looks like in terms of the relationship between those two parties. And I think that's where you've focused your efforts in, and then cut out the inefficiencies within it. And that's very commendable for yourself to do that. But, the easy access is the recruitment guys have all the databases built up over the last 50 years, or whatever else. And that's the challenge, I would imagine, is it? That's, you don't have as much of the currency in the game as these guys.
Definitely. I think, we were starting from zero, right? Our first conversations when we raised our 500K last year, we told investors we can get, companies and workers signed up. We had this big go-to-market strategy, how we were going to do that. And then, the day we closed our funding round, we had to literally turn around and say, like, okay, let's do it. And, we literally had I think 12 workers that we'd signed up to a type form at that point. And we had no companies, no conversation. We'd had conversations with sort of friendlies from Henrik's network, but no, prospects. And we had our first conversations with companies, which were like, so can we help you find labor? We'll do it cheaper, we'll do it better. And they're like, great, that sounds awesome. So how many people do you have? And then we're like, 12. And they're like, right, so yes, chatted to someone at VGC last week. They've got 500,000 or whatever it is. And so, that was the initial challenge. We realized, okay, before we start talking to companies seriously, we need to start building up this active, engaged workforce of people who are looking at our product and who are available when we need them. So we have built really, sort of clever channels into the workforce, and that's growing every day. We've grown that now from, basically the 12 I mentioned to more than 10,000 in the last sort of 6 months.
Yeah.
And that's only growing. And we've created these kind of inlands, passages to reach workers that, the likes of Indeed aren't reaching because, of all the things we spoke about earlier, language barriers, CVs, and building out these kind of referrals and taking advantage of network effects and all the things that's my background, right? Investing in network effects and figuring out how you can kind of leverage behaviors in the industry to
scale.
Scale, exactly.
Yeah.
So, we might have 10,000, which actually, yesterday that sounded like a really big number. Now that I've referenced the sort of 500,000 number, doesn't sound very big anymore. But, if you imagine we're going to be adding that many, and that's only growing as we get more funding. And
they don't own sorry to cut across you, Lucy, but they don't own the route to market for a worker. That's really what, the crux is here. It's fair game for everybody. If someone needs a job and wants a job and they're available and they're competent and they have a good background and you can vet that, there's no reason why you can't be the go-to person. It's a brand. Is it more of a brand thing than rather than sort of, we don't have to work on the fact that you guys are 50 years in the business. We're going to get a name out there that is credible, and our vetting process is better, our systematic process is better, and all in all, you guys haven't been fixing these little nuances within the recruitment process.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, it goes without saying, like these agencies who've been around for 50 years, they may have been building their networks in that time.
Yeah.
But the way that they still use the likes of Indeed, CV Library to reach new candidates every time, which shows that their existing way of reaching their networks are not working. And so, whereas we also use Indeed and CV Library to help to build our network whenever we have a job to post, because obviously we then get increasing numbers of signups. And then we add them to our network and they start to see value from the network, and they get jobs through us, and that's obviously really great. We can actually help people, which is why we got into this.
But the other thing that I'm thinking about is, and it's so archaic now that you think about it, but it still happens today, is these recruitment agencies have account managers on walking the beat every day, meeting project managers and charging foremen and site managers, and sort of, how are you today? Are you all right for labour today? What about next week? And kind of pushing their salespeople, obviously, with an account manager approach. And you're going to cut out that model as well, that you don't have to have boots on the ground guys, nearly trying to write up requisitions for labour staff every day and every week.
Well, I think, it's an interesting one. I think, again, back to your point around like not trying to change behavior too quickly in the industry. And I think, we probably will have we definitely will have boots on the ground in the early days, particularly as we start to, we're building out our customer base. We are like forging relationships. And I think, a huge aspect of building a business in construction, as you'll know, and I'm sure many of the listeners will know as well, is building that credibility and trust.
Yeah, authority.
It's absolutely like one of the most risk averse industries, which I found, really interesting actually, trying to think about marketing and brand when it comes to construction. When we walked into the room with those people for that initial sales meeting, when they asked us how many workers we had and we said 12, it's like, how can you sell to people?
Yeah.
And I would never like lie. And I know there's a lot of founders who might sort of fluff up the truth there, but I'm just not like that. I told you at the start that I like rules.
Yeah, 100%. And there's no fake it till you make it. It's it is what it is.
And so I think, that piece around like getting out and meeting people and being on the beat, I actually think is still super important in construction, which makes it very different from other tech industries and tech businesses, where you can do all your sales like on a Google Meet. When we were fundraising, Henrik, my co-founder, was still on site as an engineer, and so he was taking like Google Meets from like the canteen on site, which was hilarious. And like, obviously that's just not something that, people just don't really want to do Google Meets on site. I'm sure many people do, but like, getting out and meeting people, building those relationships, proving the credibility, you're going to be there when you say you're going to be there, I do think is still a really important feature to any business in construction.
So you tell me that you will have account managers?
I mean, I think in the short term we will. We want companies to know that it's not just like a black box of AI that they're calling into, or
I don't know. I'd like to challenge you on that a little bit, because they're taking up the time of the foreman, or generally these guys go out and meet them for lunch. Come on, I'll buy you lunch, or this kind of stuff. And with all due respect, the lads don't really have time for lunch. They eat on the go, and here's an hour or 45 minutes out of their time to talk to some guy who's all his interest is, or lady, all their interest is getting more people on the site, rather than actually working with the program and the productivity and the solutions and the forecasting and the bigger stuff. And like, with all due respect, time is money. So what does an account manager do other than facilitate the brand value to the point of raising, by the way, did you know it also does this and it also does that? But that does that need to be a touch point every week on a site?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely won't be budgeting for someone to go onto site every week. I think that's a given. So anyone who wants to work for Fixed, bear that in mind. But yeah, so I think there's definitely a difference, right, of what you described as like kind of ongoing relationship curation in the hope that they'll one day get business. I think we will be much more kind of cutthroat about like, if this isn't working, we're not going to continue like sending donuts every day. It's just not, we're a tech business, right? We want to find clients, show that we can do the job, and then start executing on it. And then the plan is like, once you prove that you can do it better, that it's a very sticky product, and why would you want to move away from our product once you start using it? And your piece around like program and forecasting, this is the bit that actually I get most excited about, being a bit nerdy. It's, I've seen these histograms of forecasting the requirement for labor on site in like Excel format, totally static. There's no kind of account for like if there's delays for whatever reason, which there obviously always will be. And, when we start plugging into those kind of labor forecast requirements, the difference we can make in terms of, making sure that the companies have the needs before they even know they have them. Project managers have, they've just got too much on their plate. If we can take that,
I think that'd be brilliant.
That would just be incredible.
If I'm a project manager or scheduler, like, and next thing I open up a tab and next thing, zoop, there's all the labor that could become available for that day. And just to clarify, when you said sending donuts, you meant actual cream donuts and stuff like that to site, yeah?
We've had some creative ideas. We haven't done that yet, just to be clear.
Oh, brilliant. No, I think that's very powerful. Like, so do you have to create, are you looking at any API sort of integrations? Are you looking at any sort of partnerships? Are you looking at any sort of creative ideas that could elevate your presence by bolting yourself in with a, uncompetitive partner?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, again, this is one of the pieces that is so exciting, and why I think a lot of companies maybe haven't been successful in this space is people are quite possessive over their sort of land, I guess. It's a bit of a land grab, and they're like, I'm not working with anyone. Even when we started, I was trying to work with other agencies and give them people for free, and everyone's like, oh, like, we don't work with other agencies, no way. And I was like, wow, there's just no collaboration here. So I've reached out to loads of potential partners, and on the tech side, on the kind of slightly less tech-enabled side, I think other recruitment agencies. There's so much opportunity for basically the job to be done better with partners. So if you think as an example, there are lots of machine operator suppliers who we could partner with. So if a company needs a 360 excavator, chances are they also need someone to manage to drive the machine. But when they put the order in for the excavator, there's not at the moment, for a lot of the companies, I mean, the likes of Lynch, etc., they would provide a person as well. But, some of them don't. They just provide the machine. What if there was an integration where it's machine plus worker, and then we get the notification to provide the worker? So that kind of thing, I think, is really exciting. Another natural piece is site access. So, there are some amazing companies that do the site access turnstiles and onboarding software like Index. So I think, those kind of companies who are incredibly forward thinking and building amazing software could be great partners for us, hopefully.
With the biometrics and stuff like that as well. Yeah,
definitely. One of the biggest pain points we see is, timesheet management. Obviously, people don't always remember they left half an hour early on a Friday, which is natural. And so, there's every week for us, it's a challenge in our scalability is managing timesheet disputes and making sure that, we get that right for the customer and for the worker, and making sure that it's fair, but we don't have access to the site access. And so we can only take the worker's word for it and the company's word for it. But if we had access to the site access software, suddenly there'd be a single source of truth where all the data comes from, removes the need for someone to have to export the data, filter out which workers are the fixed workers, and then send it to us. It's just a crazy process right now.
This is what I was thinking, like, again, back to some of the people that I know that got really badly burnt. They said the same thing, that, everybody's trying to sell their product with their own agenda into the construction industry. And really, by the sounds of things, construction companies they want it simple. They want it and maybe they just want one point of contact rather than having 7 or 8 different, product developers or product companies ringing them going, "Oh, can I come in and talk to you? There's an update on the feature," and all this kind of stuff. It's, plug and play. They're really looking for something that's more holistic, that's more integrated, that's a central point of contact, and it just seamlessly works together. So it's great to hear that you're kind of figuring that out, and that you're open-minded, I suppose is what I'm trying to say in that regard, because I think from a scalability point of view, it's very smart on your behalf.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's definitely, when we talk to, for example, principal contractors, some of whom have faced this problem that we're tackling on a massive, massive scale. And, they talk about the worst thing you could possibly offer them is a proliferation of systems. So, tell me I have to use another system. Like, no thanks. People say construction doesn't use tech, but the truth is there's actually almost too much tech that's not integrated. And so I think, I've heard stories of people having to, upload, permits into like 3 different pieces of software for like the subcontractor, principal contractor, developer, and just insane things like that. So, in trying to introduce a 30th platform is just never going to work. So as you say, I think being able to integrate and be kind of agile and fit into what they're already using is, I think, another great advantage of us being a very young, agile tech company can hopefully bring us.
Brilliant. We're going to wrap it up shortly, but I wanted to throw a few more curveballs at you because you're a very interesting, I suppose, character. So it would be interesting to see this when some of the answers to these curveball questions. But something about you that nobody else would know or nobody else would figure out, or that's a point of interest of yourself. Maybe you've done something in the past that nobody would have really known about. And again, we don't want you to go to jail for that, but
oh, not far less exciting than you're imagining, but okay, so I think probably one that no one would guess is that it's maybe a bit of a boring one. I'll do a boring one and a fun one. So
okay.
So I was born and raised in Hong Kong, China, and I speak Mandarin. That's probably a bit of a weird one.
Brilliant. I love Hong Kong. Love it.
Oh yeah, great city. And then I think more fun one would be that I've done a shark dive with no cage with more than 60 sharks.
Oh yeah.
Got to be a bit risk, a bit on the risk spectrum to be a founder.
There's a total connection between your business model and that actual story, isn't there? Isn't there? 100%.
Yeah, you said I'm swimming with sharks. They're my favourite animal. Yeah.
Okay, your favourite book, it doesn't have to be a business book. It can be anything. Your go-to book, basically, or the one that stood out for you most.
So if this wasn't a business podcast, I would have said Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. But I would have to say a book called Educated by Tara Westover, which is a really inspiring book about a woman who was homeschooled by a Mormon family in the US.
Wow.
Very good book.
Okay, excellent.
But mainly Harry Potter.
Mainly Harry Potter. Favourite holiday destination?
Anywhere I can go diving.
Wow. Okay, that's pretty much a lot of places.
It is. I think. I haven't done any of that since I started Fixed, which is a bit sad. But I think it's business got to come first.
Okay, and the final one now. I haven't really used this one before, but it's if anyone's going to answer it, you're the one that'll answer it. Knowing what you know now, what would you do different?
With regard to the business?
Anything?
Well, I think I would probably have spent a bit less time in investment banking.
Okay, interesting.
I think, I've seen a lot of people follow a similar career path without putting themselves through 4 years of 18-hour working days for 7 days a week.
Yeah, there is.
And I think that was a lot.
Yeah, I have friends that were in that market, and it's definitely a burnout. It's a real burnout process, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, there were aspects of the job I really, really liked, and
Yeah.
it's a fantastic industry and super exciting and interesting.
Very fast.
But I worked just like absolutely crazy hours, and I put my job over my health and my family and everything because I had to. And I think I realised that I probably could have got to where I have done, maybe without quite so many hours.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I think you're. I think it's a credit to yourself and your husband to walk in and get a 500,000 investment on a pitch deck. Basically, you don't get that without, the tools in the background, and maybe, we all had to get some scars on our back in order to sort of see the woods from the trees and have a better vision of what exactly, a good life looks like. And maybe, that's an important lesson in itself. That we maybe have to go through a bit of trauma in order to realize the good side of life. But listen,
It's true.
It's fantastic to have you, Lucy. How does people get in touch with you? What's the go-to to get in touch with Lucy Clarke, Fixed Construction?
So anyone can reach me on LinkedIn. I'm quite good at checking my messages, hopefully. And yeah, if you want to email me, lucy@fixedconstruction.co.uk.
Brilliant. Lucy, thank you very much. And we'd love to have you back on the podcast in the future, maybe. Just very interested to see how this model plays itself out. And I'm sure a lot of people took a lot of interest in facts, especially the fact that, there's money out there to be invested in really good, scalable companies like yourself. And I wish you the very best to yourself and all the founders.
Thank you so much.